Farms of all sizes are having to watch their expenses, perhaps closer than ever. In this environment, some ag tech can seem like an unaffordable luxury, while others can be a critical part of financial survival.
One of the things throughout my career is always, did this actually work? And so much of if it worked or not was visual or gut. Yeah, it worked. And then you get the returns and you're like, oh, those weren't so great in comparison to other years.
Todd Kirwan worked as a farm manager for many years and now is the founder of Apex Precision Agriculture. He wants to bridge the gap between field-level agronomy and high-level financial strategy. And he's seen firsthand where this can go wrong.
As you pull more and more internal, I just feel like you create this echo chamber where it's bouncing ideas off of this group inside with no outside. And so, yeah, we think we're doing great, but we're talking to is the people within the organization.
Today's episode goes beyond tech into culture, strategy, and innovation.
Don't get stuck on what Dad used to do. Dad, unfortunately, did not farm in 2025 with the new restraints and the new pressures, so we're going to have to be adaptable to stay in the industry.
Todd Kirwan on today's Future of Agriculture podcast. Hello, fellow Ag Nerd. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the founders, farmers, innovators, investors, the people shaping the future of the ag industry. Today's episode is another installment in our Tech-Enabled Advisor series. The idea here of these episodes is to better understand ag tech through the lens of the buyer and the user of that technology rather than just the entrepreneurs or investors behind it. And I've received some really positive feedback about the return of this Tech-Enabled Advisor series. By talking to these users rather than just the sellers of the tech, we get an unfiltered introduction into the technology itself. And more importantly than that, I get to see how it's used and the value that it actually provides in the way that it is used. To do this, each episode I partner with one company, and together we invite one of their customers onto the show. Now, the catch for them is that they're not allowed to script these individuals or dictate what to say or even provide any edits after it's recorded. It has to be real and unfiltered for this to work. So today's episode, featuring Todd Kirwan of Apex Precision Agriculture, is produced in partnership with AgWorld. I'm really excited to be partnering with AgWorld again. They were a part of the first time we did this Tech-Enabled Advisor series years ago. But for anyone who might not be familiar, AgWorld has been operating since 2009. Developed by and for growers and agronomists, the AgWorld ecosystem digitally connects growers with their staff, agronomists, contractors, ag retailers, and anyone else who might be involved in the farming process. The tool is set up to enable collaboration in the digital farming process so farmers can maximize financial and crop performance. With AgWorld, you're able to plan your crop, mitigate risks, and improve profitability. You're going to get a great illustration of what all that looks like on the ground in today's episode with Todd Kirwan. Todd and I discuss what types of cultural changes need to happen in a farming operation to get the most out of technology. We also discuss where things go wrong in the attempts to get the most value from farm data, why he believes the challenging farm economy today makes tools like AgWorld even more critical, and some of the changes he sees happening in the future of agriculture. Just a little bit of background on Todd before we begin. Todd Kirwan is the founder of Apex Precision Agriculture, a consultancy focused on helping growers and agribusinesses transform their operational data into their most profitable asset. With over 25 years in large-scale production agriculture, his career has been dedicated to bridging the gap between field-level agronomy and high-level financial strategy. Over that time, he's seen the industry from every angle, from moving pipe on his family's farm to directing operations for a multi-state farming enterprise. Through these experiences in farm management, he recognized a critical need for a partner who understands not just the data, but the human dynamics of implementing change. And that led him to starting Apex Precision Ag. After growing up on his family's farming operation, Todd started his own custom applicator business, and that led him into farm management and leadership for a rapidly expanding farming company called Lance Funk Farms. He then stayed on after Lance Funk sold to AgReserves, which is the agricultural company owned by the LDS Church. It was back at that time at Lance Funk Farms, when they were hyper-focused on growth, that Todd said he really started to embrace how technology could improve or even transform a farming operation.
Yeah, so he was in a growth mode for sure at that time, gaining acres. And so Lance has always felt like that technology was that competitive edge. If he can integrate the technology the quickest, he'll find that competitive edge. And so he was on board with anything we wanted to try and understand. And when drones first became a viable option, we had drones out and tried to get them to scale, and we're looking all over the country for options. So yeah, it was anything and everything he wanted to be involved in and see if he could gain that competitive advantage.
And is that still kind of mainly potatoes and small grains?
Lance was doing potatoes, small grains, sugar beets, corn, alfalfa, got into some dry beans, anything and everything we could raise in Southeast Idaho.
Okay. And as far as kind of, your management background that kind of set you up for where you are today, what are some of the lessons you kind of learned from that experience?
Just how to manage people, really the integration. So early on, I was farm manager, and I was kind of the youngest farm manager on the farm for forever. And so the tech was always my department. And so trying to integrate that into the human operating system, and getting these guys that were Luddites basically and refused to do anything and didn't want a computer and didn't want a smartphone to, hey, you need to do these reports and this is how you do it, and how can I simplify it and how can I streamline it? And so it was very much, how can I make this simple so that you'll do it?
And what did you learn about how to be successful in kind of incorporating tech into that culture?
The biggest lessons learned was to be adaptable, to not just say, okay, this is the tool, go out and find the right tool for your team, rather than here's our tool, team, jump on board.
So can you share a little bit about kind of what that looks like in practice? So what did you encounter that, that taught you that lesson?
I guess one of our biggest wins was definitely AgWorld. So when I first came on, we were using a FarmWorks, and it was basically just, we weren't pulling any real tractor data. It was there, but we weren't using a whole lot. All the tractors were case tractors with Trimble integrations in them. So there was a lot of data that no one was using there. And we weren't really tracking applications. And so finding a system was kind of the first big task that winter that I was tasked with, is, okay, we got to find something that everybody can use. And so we searched for about a year for different options. And I stumbled on AgWorld, actually on a link out of Australia is where I found them. And I'm like, oh, they're actually in the US, and implemented that. And just really selling it to the team was the big thing, of getting it set up, making everything as simple as possible. And then what really sold the guys was, as they used it at the end of the year, showing them what they did and allowing them to see, oh, this is how it translated into the crop. This is how it translated into my different yields. And them seeing all the decisions they made throughout the year translating into, okay, this was our return on the crop, and here's why we think this happened. And being able to lay it out like that, that was the biggest gain. That was the sell right there, was, wow, look, I made these decisions and I know what time I did them and what time of the year. And we've got the pictures from the scouting reports to see where the crop was at. And so after that point, it was an easy adaptation.
Interesting. So was it kind of just like a point of personal pride for them to see, like, hey, the work I did paid off? It mattered.
Yep. Or I can explain the mistakes. That was another big one too, is at the end of the year when they're sitting down, for bonus reviews or whatever, they now have the data to say, well, this is what happened. I did my job to the best of my ability. These circumstances may have been or may not have been within my control, but here's what I'm going to change next year. It just gave them a huge tool to say, here's what actually happened. And I've got the proof of what actually happened, and I can see it.
And did you have to change anything about the culture to facilitate that? Or was that already inherent in the culture there of, like, we really want to get better? We really want to make a difference, and we really want to get better. And so this just kind of allowed them that that feedback loop maybe to feel like that?
Yeah, it was a pretty strong group of, core farm managers and assistant managers that wanted to get better. They signed up because of the trajectory that Lance was on. And so they bought into, okay, we're going to grow, we're going to expand, we want to be better. And so that was kind of the culture that existed there, was how can we be the best? So.
And then from Lance Funk, you went to Ag Reserves, is that right?
Yeah. So in 2022, that fall, Ag Reserves came in and purchased Lance Funk Farms. And so I led that transition team to Canyon Falls Farms that winter.
To Canyon Falls Farms, which is a farm owned by Ag Reserves, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And was the culture different there?
Oh, vastly different. Yeah. Yeah. That was the biggest challenge, was trying to blend the two cultures, and the human operating system. Again, it was very much corporate versus sole proprietor. When I have a question, I can go talk to the boss and get an answer, to I've got a chain of command. This is how we do it. This is what we do. And you don't need to understand why. It's just what we do. So.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned your lesson earlier was kind of be adaptable. So how did you adapt to that situation, or how did you respond to that probably culture shock, I would assume?
Yeah, it definitely was. For me, my first year, I didn't adapt well. So I kind of was the insulator, the buffer for my team of, okay, I'll deal with this, and then my team doesn't really have to adapt around it. I'll still make it work. I'll be the translation from the corporate to how these guys are going to operate. And then as we went throughout the year, slowly getting team members to buy in and getting them to adapt, kind of the process was, okay, you got to come along a little bit with me. You got to give me a little bit.
So for those not familiar with Ag Reserves, can you help them understand the company, and they might have a sense of kind of be able to connect the dots with how the culture might be different?
So Ag Reserves is the farming operations of the LDS Church. They've got 4 different divisions. We were in the row crop division. So they've got farms basically all over the world for the row crop division. They're largest there in Washington. And so we were a sister company to their farm there in Washington. So yeah, large corporate structure. Our corporate offices are in Salt Lake City. And then each division had a division manager and then managers under him. And so it was very, very corporate structured.
And I know you said earlier, one of the things that made AgWorld compelling to the folks at Lance Funk Farms was the fact that, they really, really wanted to get better. And they felt kind of personally invested in the success of the company. I imagine a bigger company, there's less sort of personal connection to success of the company. Were they using AgWorld, or was that something that even worked in that system?
They were not. So AgWorld got grandfathered in for our first year of operations because I refused to let it go. And so that first year, they had their own internally developed program. And a lot of the stuff they did was internal, either driven from, a security, data privacy need, or from we can do it better inside and do it for cheaper. And so a lot of drivers within Ag Reserves to do that. And so we kept AgWorld for the first year and used it. They had a few people that came over from Washington to help us in Idaho, got them on board with it. And as they started to see it, we started to make pretty good inroads over there. And it wasn't very long before, hey, we're going to trial this. And hey, we do need to change what we've been using is super outdated and it doesn't actually work for us. And so it was slow. And then year 2, it was division wide. So.
And what was the clear difference AgWorld could make versus the internally developed system?
The clear difference for AgWorld that we saw was that you could use it on any level. So you could have your assistant managers that are doing very simple things. They could use it and it worked for them. Or you could have it in the corporate office and your accounting team pulling data from it and it worked for them. And so all levels of data and access are available, and they just were able to utilize it at all levels.
And, obviously a fundamental building block here is to have access to the data when you need it. But how do you encourage team members to be asking the right questions so that they can really use data. I know that's probably a lot of what you work on now, but like, I'm going to assume some people listening that are farmers say like, yeah, I know how to get to data, but why do I need it? I mean, what exactly is it going to do for me? So how have you helped people sort of understand which questions to be asking?
Yeah, so I think a big question that people need to be asking right now, especially with the current economics, is how do you cut costs without sacrificing quality? Right now, it's a dive to be the low cost producer right now. And so, what implications will that have in 2 years, 3 years when you're back on your rotations for your costs? Are you going to end up having to use more herbicide, more fertilizer because you're mining the soil, or you're not doing as well? And so, understanding where you can cut that won't hurt you in the future, I think, is really big. And seeing all that data and the data history, I think, is one of the biggest things, is being able to go back on your old rotations and see what you did and when you did it and what the crop looked like when you did it and what your yields were at the end of it.
And is that what you're using AgWorld for?
Yep, right now. Yep. Yeah, and through Lance Funk Farms and through Canyon Falls, that's what we really used it for, was recording. The biggest win with AgWorld is definitely your in season, recording every activity that you're doing and where you're placing everything. And then having that scouting feature as the backup data has always been really big for our team. That's one of the biggest things throughout that we've used, is field scouting, storage scoutings, to be able to see what's going on as we're doing the applications.
And you mentioned the word quality there. With the crops you're working with here in Idaho, or maybe you're working out of state too, I'm not sure. What are kind of the big quality concerns that you're watching and that data can help you monitor?
On the sugar beets, it's definitely your sugars, and understanding that and diving into your contract to understand, that return back on what you did per acre based on that sugar data is a big one. Everyone's driving for yield, but you've got to also get quality, get your protein, get your test weight. And then potatoes is a huge one. Just the different incentives on your potatoes through all the processors, and it changes with every contract and every processor, and understanding how the things that you did on the farm and in the field throughout the season affect that return on the other side. I think that's the largest thing that growers need to pay attention to.
And when you're contacted by farms now in the kind of the consulting work that you do, you described your work as sort of closing the gap between operational data and financial analysis. Where are you noticing in general, before farms get your help, that they have missing pieces?
One of the biggest missing pieces that I'm seeing is guys know what they made per acre just based on this is what the revenue was for that field. And then we just divided it out by acres, not actually understanding, down to the acre, looking at your returns, using the example of a potato processor, understanding where that load of potatoes came from, went into the storage, then went into the processor, and how that drives back to that field and the decisions that you made in season. I think a lot of guys are not really diving into those contracts and those incentives to understand the difference that they can make throughout the year.
And so are you able to do that in something like potatoes or sugar beets, kind of trace it back to the individual acre?
If the data is well enough kept, yep, we can do that. So yeah, that's one of the big projects that we did there at Canyon Falls Farms, was driving the processor returns back to the individual acres, so we could understand on an acre level what was going on, how we could do better, and how we could maximize contracts. And that's one thing that I've translated into Apex, and really a big thing that I'm driving forward.
And what's it take operationally for a farm to start doing this? If they're not paying any attention to that today, if they want to next year, do they have to hire a whole full-time person to manage all this data? Like, are you that full-time person? What's that look like? It sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. I'd love to be that full-time person, but yeah, you've got to have somebody on your team that is passionate about the data and clean data, and understanding that, good data is clean data, and good data in is the only way you're going to get good results. If you're just dumping data in and then pulling the results out at the end of the year, you're not looking at the results that you think you are. And so just having that clean data and having a system, really it's the setup of getting the system in place so that it's easy to do, so that everything is streamlined in and works for your farm. And you've customized it as well as you can, so you're not trying to redo reports over and over for different processors, but you're making it as custom as possible to capture that data.
And is that what you're doing primarily right now, is setting up those systems for the farms?
Yeah, set up for AgWorld, clean up the data. A lot of people have a ton of data, and there's quite a few guys, especially in this area, that have AgWorld, but they're not really utilizing it. There's a lot of data there. There's a lot of garbage there, and so it's cleaning it up and getting the system set up so that they can utilize it.
And if I was going to use a kind of a hypothetical situation here, like let's say I'm a pretty large farmer, but I'm not really growing very rapidly right now, especially with where kind of the farm economy is. I'm not sure that my team is ready to take on the added task of really doing this data thing right. What do I need to do culturally on my team to really modernize my operation with data?
I'd say the biggest thing you can do is set up your tractors, spend the time in the winter to get tractors set up, field boundaries set up correctly, what your plan is as close as possible to what you think you're going to do. And then that way it's easy to make small modifications. So if you're just going in and have nothing set up and nothing prepped, it's a daunting task as you're trying to execute in the year of, I got to go in and make all these work orders because they don't exist. But if they are already there, so instead of 20 units of N, I did 30 small changes and data's already there. So yeah, really getting the setup correct is kind of the biggest thing that you can do.
And how do you help people understand kind of what's at stake here? Because this sounds like a lot of work. You said it is a lot of work, right? It's also a bit of a financial investment. How do you help people understand, like, what's the difference this could make for me, or what's at stake if I don't do this?
So one of the things, and throughout my career, is always, did this actually work? And so much of if it worked or not was visual or gut. Yeah, it worked. You're sitting at the conveyor at the end of the year watching the potatoes. Yeah, these look great. And then you get the returns and you're like, oh, those weren't so great in comparison to other years. But you're looking at it through the microscope of, I've looked at, 10 different cellars be filled this year, and that's what I've seen is 10 different cellars. And how does that compare to other years? Well, that was a year ago. I can't remember. So yeah, that gut feeling is having the data to be able to back up that gut feeling and tune yourself in better and better.
Right. So you either, without it, you either can't grow, or you could potentially grow in the wrong direction, which is not growth at all, I guess. It's shrink in the wrong direction, go backwards because you think based on gut feel something's working when it's not.
Yep. Or you get sold something on, oh yeah, I can see it visually. It didn't do anything, but visually, I can see that test plot right to the line.
Yeah, we're all susceptible to those types of bias, human error. That's interesting. And you also mentioned kind of before this interview that you think that sometimes large scale agriculture can kind of end up in this echo chamber effect. Can you talk about what did you mean by that?
Just going back to that point of the drive to do everything in-house, especially with the data privacies. When someone can see your data that knows what they're doing, they can tell a lot about your operation and a lot about your financials of your operation. So having that data private and being able to know that it's secure is a big driver for, we've got to do these things internally rather than trusting an outside agronomist, trusting an outside company to manage that data and where's it going and who has access to it. And so as you pull more and more internal, I just feel like you create this echo chamber where it's bouncing ideas off of this group inside with no outside. And so, yeah, we think we're doing great, but we're talking to is the people within the organization. And of course, we all think we're doing great inside the organization, but we're not getting any outside perspective of what could be better, what can we be doing, what are we missing out on.
Could you give us an example, or maybe the most common, where you kind of come into an organization and they're kind of working with you and they think they're doing a great job and you're like, oh boy, you guys are missing this piece. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen is actually knowing what your cost per acre is. A lot of guys think they have an idea of what their cost per acre is, but that mark, I think, is missed vastly in a lot of organizations. And so they think that they're spending to this and here's their break even. But I think there's a lot of factors that they're not taking into account when they do their full cost of production.
And there's a narrative that I've had sort of in my head for a while, and I don't know if this is playing out yet. So maybe you can tell me or not, or maybe it won't play out. But it's that, as artificial intelligence is advancing so rapidly and just getting, worlds better every single year, that the importance of having this data clean, organized, and, as much history as you can is going to be even more valuable, because there will be various AI tools that will help you leverage it better. Is that playing out yet, or do you see that happening in the future?
Yeah, I see it. It's starting to play out where people with good data are able to, kind of be on the leading edge of making those decisions and seeing, okay, here's what the data is actually telling me versus what, my gut feel has been. And so having that clean data and being able to analyze it, I think that's going to be huge. I think it is going to be very, very valuable moving forward, especially with regulations, having the clean data going back years and years and years to be able to say, this is what we've done and this is how we've done it. It's going to be a big tool and a big asset for farms.
Right. And on the people side, because I know that's where you spent a lot of your career in management, is sort of like, how do we change an organization from the people side? Because that really, to me, is what it seems to come down to. Like, we could talk about the technology all day long, and the technology, in most cases, the technology's there. And in the cases where it's not there, it's getting there very fast. So I'm less worried about that than I am kind of the people side. What advice would you have for farm owners or farm managers, maybe even more importantly, who, want to build a culture that is ready for technological change?
Yeah, definitely find something that works for your organization. If your organization is, on the bleeding edge, or if your organization is a very late adopter, understand that and then start to implement based on that. Don't go out and say, we're kind of the people that wait and see whether the technology works and jump on something that is brand new, because you're just going to burn that bridge. And then over and over, management will point to, well, we tried that 2 years ago and you failed, so we're not doing anything new. So definitely understand your organization, understand how to implement it, and be flexible. You've got to implement it to your organization. So don't take a piece of software or, drones, and you're spread out over 10 different counties and think, okay, I'm going to buy a couple of drones and get across everything and look at images every week. Just understand what the capabilities actually are and the time that will take. So,
yeah. Did I read you were an expert witness? That was kind of interesting. What was that all about?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm an expert witness on a case, a contract dispute that happened several years ago. And so I'm just going through all of the data and analyzing it. And that's where I've seen, good data and good record keeping has been huge on, no, that's not actually what happened. Here's what happened. And this farmer has the data to prove that that's what he did. So
interesting. And so, yeah, they bring you as an expert witness who's combed through the data to state the facts about what most likely happened.
Yeah, and being able to look at the data, just years and years of seeing results and looking at data. So I understand, okay, this is what the data says, and here's what the standard result is from the data, and being able to look at, he's got all this information and he says this is what happened, and yeah, it matches up, or no, it doesn't match up. So,
and as you're talking to all these folks, some of which probably hire you, some of which may not, as you're getting a sense of where they're at, how would you rate, at least in your area, how far along we are on the kind of data journey as a farm, as an industry? Are we still like a 1 out of 10 in terms of utilizing tools to use our data effectively? Or are we getting closer to like a 7, 8 or more?
No, I'd say we're probably in that 5 range on an average. I think there's a lot of farms that are capturing a lot of data that just don't know what to do with it, don't know how to organize it, don't know how to implement it, don't know what it says at the end of the day. I've got all this data. It's great. I don't have time to go through it and make any actionable assumptions from it. So here it is. Yeah. So I think guys are doing a lot more with capturing the data. And then it's if they get to it, in the winter to go through it and make decisions for next year.
And probably to get from like a 5 to like a 10 is going to take a lot of cultural change in terms of the people. But I'm curious, if you were to tell the ag tech industry what they needed to do to take it from a 5 to a 10, what do we still need from ag tech out there that we're not getting?
Oh, the biggest thing I see with ag tech is they'll come in and sell a piece, sell some software, sell, probes, monitors, and then not walk the farmer through the setup. I think that's the biggest miss is how can we set it up better for the grower to be able to get, actionable data out. The one thing that I've seen over and over is field boundaries. Farmers will have 5 or 6 different field boundaries in 5 or 6 different pieces of software, and none of them are the same. And so they're looking at, imagery, and it's pulling in the wrong field boundary and like, that doesn't match up. And that's the last time they're going to look at it.
And that's sort of the problem that Apex is currently kind of focused on solving, isn't it? I mean, it would seem to somebody from the outside to say like, oh, AgWorld will sell their technology directly to a farmer who can buy it directly from AgWorld. What's Todd doing kind of in the middle? And then it's sort of like making it all work, isn't it?
Yep. Setup, making sure your setup is the way you want it and making sure it's customized as well as possible for you to implement it in your farm.
And, beyond setup, what else are you kind of helping customers with? Are you doing training, troubleshooting? What are the kind of the list of services that you do to basically, to oversimplify what you do, like to help a farm adopt a technology like AgWorld, a platform like AgWorld? What's all involved in that other than setup?
So it'd be the setup and then implementation throughout the year, just making sure that everything works, the data flows in and out the way they want it. Really customizing it throughout the year, because as you set it up, you think you know what you want, but throughout the year, things are definitely going to change. There's some great tools within AgWorld. Definitely the precision layers is what I've always been passionate about. So building maps out, getting maps in. So as you're getting data from other sources, being able to put that into, that single platform so that you can utilize those layers. So I'm doing that throughout the year. And then the end of season, driving it back to that revenue per acre of understanding everything that happens with as many precision layers as possible. And so driving back to that. And really one area that I'm focused on is, kind of changing the way that we do grid maps. So for potatoes right now, we do a 2-acre grid map. Most customers will do it, every time it goes into a potato rotation. Currently, it's a static yield goal. So for this field, I want 500 sacks of potatoes. And so they're using that static yield goal to decide what fertilizer throughout that field. And one thing that I'm trying to doing is making that yield goal a 2-acre yield goal. So for every 2 acres, we've got a yield goal. And that yield goal is based on as many layers as they want, whether it's previous crop yields or satellite imagery, old grid maps, soil type, soil texture. So pulling that in to have, a dynamic yield goal for fertilizer.
From your perspective, how is the industry changing, and how do you see it kind of evolving in a different direction in the coming decade? It can be related to what we've talked about so far or not, up to you. You've been in this farm manager role or consultative role with farm managers for a long time. I'm curious how the pressures on someone in that role are different and where you see it going.
Right now, just with the economics of the farm, it's really about driving cost. And it seems to cycle. It's a 7-8 year cycle of we're driving costs as low as we possibly can to we're getting it as advanced as possible. It's kind of cycles up and down. And so right now, I think the real big drive is how can we reduce our costs, and then we're going to start to see the guys that are producing quality to capitalize on the market on the other side. It's the guys that throughout the low cost, we're still able to produce quality. Processors, the industry is going to look at them and say, yeah, they're a quality farmer. They're going to get the contracts on the other side of this.
Makes sense, yeah. Defaults to quality. And outside of AgWorld, what other sort of innovative ideas do you see out there in agriculture that you find interesting?
I think the irrigation that we're starting to see, the variable rate irrigation, especially in Idaho, water's a huge one. And being able to have that integration of what your wells are pumping into your system, what your system is putting down, and being able to apply that more accurately per acre, I think is going to be a huge thing that is coming. I think it's here. And the farmers that are able to invest in that and get a per acre so that they can, see those pumping savings, I think that's going to be a huge one moving forward. Water restraints they're a big player in Idaho right now.
Well, this show is going to be 10 years old next year. But my question is, if we were going to have this same interview 10 years from now, will we still be talking about sort of like, data or what else do you think we'll be talking a whole lot more about?
Oh, I definitely think we'll be still talking about data. I think data is here to stay. I think it's going to be more and more of an important factor for farms moving forward. Yeah, so I think data will be here to stay. I think AI is really the next big driver in agriculture, getting down, less than that per acre. Those systems are advancing at a very rapid pace, and being able to see plant health plant by plant, I think is something that's coming at us.
Very cool. Well, Todd, what didn't we get to that you were either hoping to mention or that we should at least, either add or emphasize?
I think we've kind of covered everything. Nothing stands out for sure.
I always like to ask, like, for a final, just to put some kind of punctuation on the episode, if you were to give like your TED talk, right? Your kind of like signature speech to the industry, what would you want their take home message to be?
Don't get stuck on what Dad used to do. That's always been one of my biggest cringes, is we've never done it that way, or Dad didn't do it that way. Dad, unfortunately, did not farm in 2025 with the new restraints and the new pressures. So we're going to have to be adaptable to stay in the industry. That's going to be a big thing, is if you're not going to adapt to the changes, I don't foresee you being around if you don't.
Well, a really strong point there to end our episode on. Thank you very much to Todd Kirwan for taking the time to be on the show here today. I can remember almost 7 years ago now, I interviewed a couple of farmers. This was episode 135 of this podcast in January of 2019. And they both said they expected to have a data manager on their staff in their farming operations in the coming years. And what Todd's doing with Apex is essentially giving farmers a chance to have that expertise in the form of an outside consultant, which is kind of cool to see here 7-ish years later. Because I remember at that time thinking of a farming operation of the sizes those guys had, having a data manager on the team seemed like kind of a far out idea. But here we are. Thanks again to AgWorld for partnering with me on this episode. Go see why they are agriculture's preferred independent farm information management ecosystem at their website, agworld.com. Last but never least, thank you for your time and your attention. I do not take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.